Hello guys, this is Gene What Ifs. And welcome to What If Izuku Midoriya Had 6 Eyes. Please make sure to like and subscribe. Now let's get into the what if. Kyoka Jairu takes a deep breath as she approaches the gates towards UA, finding herself nervous just being there. This was it. This was what months of training had led to. It was do or die, really. It's do or fail, but the point still stands. She was either going to pass or she was going to fail. It was time to find out which. All around her people were looking similar to her. Some were nervous as hell, some were confident as hell, and some were having a breakdown. She can't blame them. This was the greatest hero school in the whole country. Of course you would be nervous, it's only reasonable. But could they be more quiet about it? Take the green-haired guy in front of her, for example. He was standing still for the past few minutes, muttering his head off, talking so softly normal people wouldn't be able to hear. Except for her. I know, I can't help it. Everyone's just so much more prepared than I am. Imagine them in their underwear. Why? He mutters to himself almost crazily. Just let me think, okay? Hey, you all right there? She taps him on the shoulder, surprising him, and getting him to turn back in surprise and fall backwards at the same time. She winces, thinking he's in for a rough landing, when suddenly he starts hovering mid-fall. Oh, that was close. He sighs in relief before getting back to his feet. Sorry, oh God, I'm talking to a girl. The boy whispers the last part under his breath. Once he looks at her face and begins blushing nervously. Great, it was one of those guys. Hopefully, he doesn't think she's coming on to him or anything. Look, I just want to check since you've been standing there talking to yourself. Seems a little too early for a mental breakdown, right? Myself? He snaps out of whatever state he was in. Right, of course. It must have been the nerves. Can't afford to lose it now, can I?
Ah,
He says, laughing fakely as Jairu looks at him weirded out. Right. She points towards Yue's entrance. I'm just gonna go. That's fair. He mutters to himself as he starts walking towards the entrance as well, before suddenly looking over his shoulder and whispering, What? I can't just talk to her. She thinks I'm weird. Well, yeah, you're talking to yourself, she says, snapping him out of his thoughts. Geez, are you really that nervous? Why, you heard that. He blushes, embarrassed. Sorry. Force of habit. You have a habit of talking to yourself? Jairu raises a brow as the boy stutters for a response. Never mind. We all have our quirks. The non-biological ones, I mean.
richt.
All of us have quirks, funny. He says with the fake, awkward laugh again before going silent. Sorry. I must look so stupid. He says, looking downcast and guilty like a kicked puppy. I've seen worse. She says with a sigh after a pause. Look, don't sweat it. And relax. You're not going to get through this by being crazy. Right. You're right. He slaps himself in the face. I need to focus. They continued walking through the hall of UA to find their own halls, and before long the boy nervously spoke again. So, those lobes on your ears, are they related to your quirk? He asks after a pause. Yeah, why? Jairu asks, reflexively tense, ready for another round of teasing about how they look weird like she was used to. I think they look cool, he says, surprising her. Do they work like normal headphone jacks? Are they universal or only for certain models? What material are they made of? How well can you control them? He asks, suddenly whipping out a notebook from nowhere that surprises her. Seeing this, he looks down awkwardly. Sorry, another habit. I'm just really curious about quirks, and write them all down. You must really like them a lot. Jairu says, looking at the notebook's burnt cover that said, Hero Analysis for the Future number 13. 13 whole notebooks? Yeah, it's a hobby of mine. It's probably weird to you. The boy says, and Jairu shrugs. Not really. There's definitely weirder hobbies, she says as she plays with her earlobes. And while I can stretch them up to 6 meters and detect sound as far as 12 meters, they're pretty strong, I guess, if you consider being able to punch holes in concrete strong. That's really cool. That's a pretty versatile quirk you have there, the boy says as he excitedly jots it down in his book. You can do a lot with that, like rescuing and combat. It's a good quirk to have as a pro hero. Jairu blushes at that, looking away. It wasn't often she heard someone complimenting her quirk like that except for her parents. Thanks. What about your quirk then? Some kind of levitation, she asks, remembering what she saw at the entrance. Air, well, it's better to just show, he says nervously, holding out an open hand. Touch my hand. Is this going to be one of those pull my finger jokes? She asks, and Izuku shakes his head.
No.
No, just do it please. It's easier to show. Quickly please, he says, looking flustered and embarrassed. Curiosity overtaking her, she does as he asks and presses her hand against his. Or at least tries to. What the dash? She mutters as she tries, pushing only to find a gap between both their hands. No matter how hard she pushes, it feels like a wall. What is this? Some kind of invisible barrier? No, it's more complicated than that. The boy says as he withdraws his hand and exhales a breath. I was infinitely dividing the space between us. What? Jairu looks at him confused. Well, you see, if you divide something in half, no matter how much you do, you'll never reach zero. The boy explains, so if I keep dividing the space between your hand and mine, they can never touch each other. It'll just slow before we touch until it looks like it's stopped. That's my quirk, limitless. That sounds so broken. Jairu says bluntly, so you can't be touched by anyone you don't want? That's like making you invincible. The boy winces as he rubs his forehead. It is, but not in practice for me. I get exhausted quickly the more I use it, so I can only keep it up for a few seconds to deflect attacks. Keeping it up any longer burns me out quickly and hurts my head. Huh, so not so limitless after all. She laughs at her own pun and gets a chuckle out of the boy as they arrive at a doorway leading to an assembly hall. So I guess we're in the same hall then. What's your seat? The two of them gave out their seat numbers, realizing they were in different rows and far from each other. Oh, I'll see you later, I guess, he says, looking at his notes before hesitating. I didn't get your name, did I?
I'm Izuku.
Izuku Midoriya. Kyoka Jairu, she says before entering the hall with a smirk. Break a leg out there, Midoriya. Izuku awkwardly waves as she leaves, and once he is sure she is out of range, he barely muffles a squeal with his hands. I just talked to a girl. Why did you make me do that? She probably thinks I'm a weirdo. A voice laughs in his head. Hey, I'm stuck here for the rest of my life. I can only rewatch so many Game of Thrones reruns to pass the time. You need more variety up here. What say we do another marathon after this? Besides, I think I saw a smirk back there. You know what that means? You've got a chance. Satoru Gojo points finger guns at him from his mind space, as he continues laughing at Izuku's embarrassment. 10 months ago, Izuku struggles against the hold of the slime villain, who continues pouring his slime down his throat forcefully. His body was full of the stolen goods and cash he had just gotten from all those stores. Gee kid, thanks for the save, he gloats. Just the meat bag I need to sneak past that guy. You're my hero. But as the boy was struggling and he was pouring his goo inside, he kept looking over his shoulder to make sure that damned hero wasn't here yet, and in his distracted state, he loses track of one of the stolen items in his possession, stolen from an antique store across the convenience store along with whatever bundle of cash it had in its register. A small ceremonially engraved hexagonal box that looked to have some gold on it, likely some kind of jewel box. Thinking it would fetch a high price, he took it with him, and while he was looking over his shoulder, the struggling Izuku Midoriya accidentally smacked the old and loose lock open in his desperate struggle. For whatever reason, the contents of the box were released and pulled by the stream of slime into Izuku's mouth. A pair of dried eyeballs were accidentally swallowed with the rest of the slime, and then his struggling stopped. The slime villain thinks the boy has finally given up and glances back, only to be confused at the sight of green eyes replaced by strange and calm blue eyes. But before he could question it, in a flash he exploded, scattering his slime everywhere in the tunnel. The boy then retches the slime in his stomach, violently vomiting before coughing. Bleh, 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 he groans, sounding completely different as he wipes his tongue with his bare hands. Oh, that was so disgusting. It's like that time I tried cooking ramen on a space heater. Ugh, where am I? The last thing I remembered was All at once memories came flashing into his mind. Shibuya, the prison realm, ghetto, or rather Kinjaku. December 24th, Sukuna. It all came rushing back, as well as new memories that weren't his. Deku, quirks,
Pro Heroes.
All Might, These words and their meanings came rushing into his head, and he was sure if he didn't possess his 6 eyes, he would be overloaded with all this information. Then the most recent memories came rushing in as he looked at the ceremonial box on the floor and groaned. Don't tell me, they pulled a Sukuna with my eyes? Welcome to today's live performance. Everyone say, hey, hey. Gojo shouts from inside Izuku's head to the latter's frustration in response to present mic. Tough crowd. Huh? Well, that's cool. My examinee listeners, he shouts undaunted by the silence he received. Name's present mic, and I'm here to present the guidelines to your practical exam. Are you ready? Yeah. Gojo shouts again, and Izuku groans, slamming his head to the desk at the migraine he was receiving. Gojo-sensei, he can't even hear you. Please stop. He pleads in a whisper. Hey, this guy just gets being a teacher. Gojo chuckles. Come on, give him a yeah for me.
yeah.
Izuku gave out the most reluctant yeah ever heard, but present Mike took it. Great. Glad to hear the enthusiasm, kiddos. Now on to what you all came here for, the exam, he says, pressing a button and displaying a projection on the wall consisting of information. Get ready for the most intense 2-hour exam ever. It's your job to get out there and break as many robots with your quirks, body, and whatever gear you can get your hands on. That's right. You're allowed to bring whatever you want. Just be at your assigned location when it starts. K. Huh. Reminds me of the exchange event back in the old days. Gojo notes as Izuku jots this down. Each site's filled to the brim with 3 types of faux villains. The only rule out there, listeners? Playing the anti-hero and fighting other examinees for points. Other than that, go nuts. Present Mike continues. They're all ranked by difficulty, with 1 the weakest and 3 tougher than 1 and 2. Huh. Maybe they should let examinees try targeting others. It would certainly spice things up a bit. Gojo ponders out loud. That won't be very heroic, Gojo-sensei. He whispers to himself. Kid, you gotta remember I'm literally in your head. Just think your response, otherwise, people like that girl are gonna think you're crazy. Gojo reminds. Before Izuku could answer, someone raised their hands. May I ask a question? A tall, bespectacled boy with blue hair standing up and raising his hand. There appear to be no fewer than 4 varieties of faux villains on this handout. Such a blatant error is highly unbecoming of Japan's top hero institution. And you, with the curly hair. Izuku looks surprised as he gestures at himself as Gojo says, Told you. You've been muttering this whole time and distracting all of us. Is this some sort of game to you? Then if so, please leave immediately. The bespectacled boy says, looking annoyed at him. All right, examinee 7111. Nice catch. Present Mike interrupts to prevent an argument from breaking out, clicking the remote again, displaying the outline of a robot that looks like a brick. This little guy's called the 0-pointer. And as you can guess, there are 0 points awarded for its destruction. There's only 1 on each site. Its whole deal is to cause trouble and slow you down. Think of it like a womp from Super Mario. I recommend my listeners to just carry on and ignore it if you can. So he knows his games as well. This guy's a teacher after my own heart. Oh, that reminds me, you should play some Super Mario. There's not enough video game memories up here for me to play with. Gojo says as Izuku groans. Some classic Mega Man and Sonic if you can as well. Those were bangers in the old days, as you kids would say. All right, I won't keep you here anymore. That's all from me, folks. Present Mike declares. With that said, let's end it with a favorite quote of mine. From Goodwill, Napoleon Bonaparte. True heroism is being superior to the ILLS of life. Plus ultra, everyone. Break a leg. You know, I don't actually know how to feel about this, Gojo mutters as he crouches and stares at the graves in front of him. In some forgotten cemetery in Tokyo, all the names in front of him were familiar ones. Yuji Itadori, Megumi Fushiguro, Nobara Kujisaki, Maki Zenin, Toji Inumaki, Yuta Okatsu. There was no gravestone for Panda. He wondered if it was because he was buried elsewhere, or if there were complications with burying a life-size stuffed panda or something. I stopped by Tokyo Jujitsu High. You'd never guess what they did with it. He lets out a hollow chuckle, turned it into a real school, modernized and all. buried every last trace of anything that had to do with jujitsu, got rid of the cursed tools in the warehouse, the morgue, isolation chamber, and even sealed up the tomb of the Star Corridor. I don't see Tinjin anywhere here, so I guess he's gone as well. I'm not sure if you guys know, but the moment I stepped here there were near zero traces of cursed energy. The kid, and I think it has probably something to do with quirks, whatever the hell they are. It made some sort of sense. He had sensed a different kind of energy in these quirks, something unlike cursed energy or positive energy. If somehow quirks replaced cursed energy in humans, it led to both a decrease in cursed spirits and cursed techniques, meaning the slow extinction of cursed users and sorcerers. It meant only the quirkless, a slowly dying breed, were capable of having cursed energy potential, and they were too far spread out to cause anything on the scale of, say, special grade cursed spirits or something. Too weak to try anything. It looked like Ghetto got half of what he wanted. Ah, right. You probably don't know who I'm talking about. He laughs. Get this, I'm in a Sukuna position. Apparently, some idiot back then after I died took my eyes and turned them into cursed objects. Hopefully, it wasn't Kinjaku, and you guys killed him. But back to the kid. His name's Izuku Midoriya. Nice boy, kinda reminds me of you, Yuta. Back when we first met. Crippling self-doubt and self-depreciation. It would have been like looking in a mirror. He then pauses, lost and not sure what else to say before gathering his thoughts and continuing. I'm not sure how most of you died. We're jujitsu sorcerers, we don't die in our beds. But I'd hope it was how you'd all wanted to go out at the very least. Gojo says somber before standing back up. Anyways, I gotta go now. Promise the kid I only need a few minutes to say goodbye. It's been a blast. Suddenly, the eyes turn from blue to green as Izuku Midoriya returns to possession of his body. Have you said all you wanted, Gojo? Izuku asks awkwardly. You can take as long as you need. I don't mind. It's fine. Gojo says in his head. I've said what I needed. Izuku nods as he looks at the gravestones. These were your students then? I can't believe there were powers before quirks.
Curse technique.
Gojo corrects. It was to avoid mass panic in the masses. Imagine if they knew that all their negative thoughts and emotions were leading to the creation of cursed spirits and roughly 10,000 deaths annually. Izuku winces. Yeah, something like that happened when quirks first showed. The dark age of quirks, society collapsed, international trade was near zero, stock market and the internet crashed, leading to mass violence and destruction. Must have seen a lot of curse activity during then. Before Jujutsu High was closed down, I mean. Gojo says with a sigh. Damn it. Izuku remains silent, not knowing what to say to a man who woke up days ago realizing that everything he knew and loved was gone. So, what now? He asks unsure. You're just going to live here forever? Well, until you die actually. Then we're both dead. Gojo shrugs before thinking. But that would be boring. And boring isn't how Satoru Gojo goes out. Huh. Izuku says confused before in his mindscape, a vast and swirling black void with white stars in the background. He sees Gojo standing in front of him. I only know you for a few days, Midoriya, but just like you, our memories got shared the moment you chowed down on my eyes. Gojo explains as he paces around Izuku. So you want to be a superhero, but you don't have a superpower to be one because without one you turn into another late-night obituary. Izuku winces at that, but doesn't speak up knowing that he was right. But call it fate, call it luck, call it karma. Whatever reason you swallowed my eyes and lived, which means you've hit the jackpot. Gojo says, pointing finger guns at him. It might take some time, but eventually my inherited technique will be ingrained into your body. What are you saying? Izuku says, not daring to hope. I'm saying that eventually, you'll be able to use my limitless. Gojo says as he flashes a small lapse blue in his palm before dissipating it. As I said, you hit the jackpot, kid, because back in the old days I was the strongest for a reason. But even without that, you still have a top-grade sorcerer's worth of cursed energy. I'm talking strong enough to lift cars, jump over whole stories, and tank bullets at minimum. You're saying, I can have a quirk, I can be a hero? Izuku asks, his legs shaking, trying to keep tears out of his eyes. All his life he heard it from everyone, even his own mother, his idol, that he couldn't become a hero because of his lack of quirk, But now hear a ghost from a time before Quirks was offering his powers and telling Izuku what he had always wanted to hear from anyone. You got balls, kid. The day we met I saw you charge towards a pile of slime blowing up an entire city block while holding the worst asshole of a kid I've ever seen hostage. All while you weren't even thinking that I would be able to save you with my technique. Gojo smiles at him. You went there certain that you were going to die, but at least you were going to save someone who was a colossal prick to you for your entire life. You're possibly one of the craziest kids I've met. I mean, there has to be something wrong up there if you want to die to save someone who was, in all honesty, borderline torturing you your whole life, and not even a day ago told you to take a swan dive off a roof. You're beyond all doubt insane, and that's exactly what you need to be a sorcerer. Gojo kneels down to his eye level and offers a hand. So what do you say, kid? Let's make a pact. I'll offer up my power and guide you to becoming a superhero. And you make sure I don't die of boredom while I'm with you. Deal? Izuku choked on his tears before collapsing on his arms and knees, crying his throat out as Gojo stood there awkwardly with his hand out. I'll take that as a yes then? A one-pointer. Izuku exclaims as he sees the robot come speeding out of an alley targeting him. Taking a breath, he steadies himself as he begins channeling cursed energy throughout his body like Gojo had taught him. A spark of negative emotions was what he needed, something he was not lacking in. Carefully, it was coursed through his body to avoid letting it run wild and wastefully. He had refined this through movie marathons with the blindfolded man, who would punish him when he wasn't channeling it correctly. The robot charges at him, but Izuku leaps over the robot despite its high speed. Flipping over it, and while in the middle of doing so, he swings his foot downwards infused with cursed energy, smashing into the robot's head and decapitating it as Izuku landed on his feet. 1 point. He smiles at the sight in disbelief. I can't believe ow. Izuku winces as he feels Gojo take over his own hand to give himself an uppercut, a result of one of the pacts he made during their training. Oi. Did I see your cursed energy fluctuating there? Gojo warns as he returns control to Izuku. That's just 1 point, but take a look around you. Izuku does so and pales, realizing that many of the students are already taking down plenty of robots. If he doesn't want to fall behind, he has to keep up. He dashes through the streets looking for more points, but to his slowly growing dread, he finds almost none to be seen. 5 minutes in, and all he came across were robots already engaged with examinees. This is bad. He mutters to himself, at this rate, all that training will be a waste if I can't find robots. What are you talking about? There's plenty of them around. Gojo points out the robots currently engaged as Izuku gets his meaning. But I'll be stealing their points. Izuku protests, that's not right. He hears Gojo sigh, geez, I never had a troublesome student like you before. Listen up, Midoriya. Do you think everyone here is going to end up in UA?
What?
Izuku asks, confused as Gojo continues. There are only 40 spots, 20 for each class of the hero curriculum. Gojo says, that means more than 3/4 of these kids aren't getting in. There's not going to be enough robots for all of them. There's going to be a limited amount to weed out the best 40 of these examinees. They all deserve a chance to be heroes. I don't want to be the one to take it away from them. Izuku says, weakly clenching his fist, knowing how painful it is to have your dreams crushed by someone. Think of it this way, that 1-pointer you beat just now? That could have made the difference between someone passing and failing. You already took that from someone. Gojo rationalizes, it's up to you to decide, whose dreams are more important, yours or theirs. Izuku's fist relaxes as he stands there, sighing in defeat. Gojo was right. Most of them will fail whether he likes it or not. He can only decide whether he is one of those that fail or the ones that pass. In the corner of his eye, he spots someone getting knocked back by a 3-pointer and is about to get back into the fight before he suddenly comes from behind it, leaping into the air before delivering an axe kick right into its head, crushing it. Hey! The student shouts. That was my 3 points.
I'm sorry.
Izuku apologizes before running towards the next robot, but only a few of us can succeed, and I aim to be one of them. We never told them how many villains there are, or where they are placed. Such a wide battlefield and a limited amount of time. Nedzu muses out loud as he takes another sip. A little preview into life of professional heroism. There will be competition, and you have to decide what to do about it. An admittedly harsh lesson to learn this early. Toshinori acknowledges as he observes the screens of children fighting robots. It's a harsh world, the life of a pro hero. Nedzu says as he gestures to a number of examinees across the screens. But it also brings out the best in them. You can already see them developing their specialties. There are those who can assess information in an instant, intelligence gatherers. Those who will never be late for a party are mobility experts. Those who can cope with any situation are decision makers. Then there are the natural-born warriors. And the opportunists, those that will do everything to win. The teachers watch as a boy with green hair uses a red-haired boy with a hardening quirk as a jumping pad to deliver a flying kick to the two-pointer he was engaging with. It's expected. Snipe shrugs. There are only a limited number of robots per area. Not enough for everyone. It's survival of the fittest down there. First come, first serve. Wait! Toshinori mutters as he glances at the face of the green-haired boy. That boy. The one with green hair and the enhancer quirk. Who is he? Let's bring up the records. Let's see, the boy's name is Izuku Midoriya. Quirk is listed as Limitless, an ability that allows him to warp space to an extent. 13 perks up upon hearing this, finding it similar to her quirk, manipulating space? It doesn't look like it. To me, it looks like it's a standard physical enhancement type. Perhaps he's using the spatial manipulation to enhance his movement? Make him move faster and therefore hit harder?
Kan theorizes.
But that's impossible. Toshinori mutters, I met this boy before, about 10 months ago. He told me that he was quirkless then. The teachers raise their brows at this, confused as Nedzu continues reading his file. It looks like he's a late bloomer then, Nedzu mutters neutrally. But that's impossible. No one's that late of a bloomer. Snipe argues, I've never met anyone who got their quirk any older than 5 years old. And yet here we are. Nedzu says, a boy who apparently only gained his quirk 10 months ago. He brings up the boy's quirk profile and Toshinori's eyes widen. The date of creation was in fact a week after he had met the boy. A week after the slime villain incident. It can't be possible. It can't be a coincidence. But this was impossible. Could it be possible that a timer beep interrupts him, snapping him out of his thoughts? Ah, it appears it is time for that. Nedza hums as he presses a button. Let's see how they all react in the face of overwhelming odds. 45. Izuku shouts as he delivers a spinning kick that decapitates a one-pointer before using it as a platform to launch himself towards a two-pointer, enhancing his durability with cursed energy, allowing him to smash through it unharmed. 47. Hours of battling robots, and that's all he can muster. Yet he only felt a little out of breath. How much physical energy must he have exerted in the time it took between the start of the practical exam and now? Cursed energy was truly amazing if it allowed him this level of power. It felt exhilarating. Not bad, not bad. But I don't see you using Limitless yet. Gojo notes as he observes Izuku's dismantling of robots with his bare hands. Because there's so many people around, and I don't have much practice. Izuku pants as he deflects a punch from another one-pointer before kicking right through its torso like its steel was made of butter. I don't want to accidentally hurt anyone, or burn up too quickly. There's nothing worth using it on yet. As he says this, the ground suddenly shakes as all eyes turn to the center of the test site where a few dozen meters away from Izuku, a building-sized robot looking like it had a brick for a head emerged, crushing entire city blocks around it as well as skyscrapers as it pushes itself up. Quick! Wish for a new IMAX sound system. Gojo insists as Izuku pales at the sight before him. Even with a full-powered lapse blue, could he take it down? Leg it! A random examinee shouts as he runs the other way. Every man for themselves. This starts a chain reaction as examinees begin fleeing the scene away from the giant robot, and Izuku is about to follow them. It was worth 0 points anyway. There was no point burning himself up just to take it down when he could find other robots with points. But then he hears it. A familiar voice. God fucking damn it. He hears as he turns to see Kyoka Jairu pinned down with her leg stuck under a large piece of rubble from a fallen building, cursing in pain and rage. Piece of shit. Fuck. In that moment, everything else fades away. The noise of the fleeing students, the sound of the mechanical monstrosity before him, and the voice of Gojo telling him something. He ignores it all and dashes towards Jairu, but then he sees how close the robot is and knows he can't make it. He has to use that. Izuku skids to a stop and puts his hands into a sign, preparing himself for the backlash as he begins chanting. Phase. He chants as curse energy is poured into the limitless technique, amplifying and extending it beyond its neutral state, twilight. Eye of Wisdom. He thrusts both hands in front of him, a swirling orb of blue energy manifesting as it sucked in dust, air, and pebbles. The incantations combined with hand signs pushed it far beyond his usual 100%. Curse technique lapse. He chants as blood begins leaking out of his nose, but pushes through the pain as he reels his hand with the orb of blue back, maximum output, blue. Izuku slings it right as far as he can towards the head of the zero-pointer, and its effect is immediate. The magnetic force exerted by blue pulls the head apart, contorting its upper torso and twisting it as the head was pulled right off towards a swirl of gravitation force before being crushed like a grape. Below, Jairu could feel the updraft caused by the blue's attraction, looking up in shock at the sight of the crushed head floating for a moment before falling back down on the rest of the zero-pointer, crushing it. This was from that boy she saw freaking out and talking to himself this morning? Talk about completing and going against all expectations. Hey, Green, did you just do that? Jairu shouts from where she was, stunned at what she just saw. What the hell was that? You just pulled its head off like it was. She trails off as she notices something wrong with Izuku, still stuck in his stance after throwing blue towards the zero-pointer, blood dripping from not only his nose, but from the corner of both his eyes which were unresponsive, his mouth agape and looking like he stopped breathing. Ugh, what happened? Izuku groans as he slowly opens his eyes, finding himself in a familiar black void lit up with stars in the background. Did I go overboard again? Yep. Almost completely melted your brains out of your nose. Gojo says, suddenly appearing before him and startling Izuku. You gotta be careful there. You're carrying both of us up here, and I don't want to kick it because you went all self-sacrificial. Izuku winces. I'm sorry, Gojo-sensei, but when I saw Jairu almost get crushed, I had to act. I wasn't thinking about how bad I'd be hurt. I knew there was going to be backlash, but that was a whole other level. Yeah, that's what you get for using a maximized technique while completing all the hand signs and incantations. You pushed curse technique lapse, blue to almost twice its maximum output. I'm not surprised your brain couldn't handle the blowback. Gojo explains, and if you'd listen, you'd know that there's no way she was gonna die. This is an exam for crying out loud. You're right.
I'm sorry, Gojo-sensei.
Izuku says apologetically as he bows his head. That made so much sense, and he nearly risked killing both Gojo and him for no reason. Gojo sighs, geez, you're reminding me of one of my students. He was throwing his life away every chance he got before I talked sense into him. What is with me and that type? I don't know. When I see someone in danger, I just have to act. Just like All Might does. Izuku says, and I figured you could heal me like you did when that slime villain blew me up with Kaken's quirk. He shudders at the memory, his arm reaching for his side where he remembered feeling an empty gap. Nothing wrong with being reckless. Reckless insanity is a cornerstone of jujitsu. Plus, self-sacrifice and all that for the greater good is noble. Gojo sighs, but at this rate, willing to throw your life away for no reason, you won't grow strong enough to be top 10, let alone number 1. So how do I get stronger, Gojo-sensei? Izuku asks, looking up at the white-haired man. He smirks, we have a lot to work with, but I think the first problem to solve is you relying on my reverse curse technique. You think it's fine, that you can risk yourself just because you have something akin to a reset button, but let me tell you, even reverse curse technique has its limits. Besides, do you really want me to hold your hand this whole time towards number 1? No. Izuku says determinedly, you're right. I can't just depend on you to save me. I need to save myself and save others with my own power. That's the spirit. Gojo cheers before whipping out a scroll of parchment from nowhere. Which brings me to this. Satoru Gojo's 6 Eyes Challenge. Huh. Izuku stares blankly and confused as Gojo unfurls it and shows it to him. What is this? Written on the parchment, he finds the words a list. Every additional 10 seconds Izuku Midoriya lasts against Satoru Gojo equals 10 seconds. Land a black, flash for the first time equals 30 seconds. Use simple domain and or reverse curse technique for the first time equals 1 minute. Learn to use domain expansion equals 30 minutes. Beating Satoru Gojo equals unlimited access. Yep. Every milestone you reach, you'll get time with my 6 eyes as mentioned. Gojo says proudly, right now, Midoriya, you're strong. I'd say about semi-second grade, and if you keep going you'll make it first grade no doubt. But the thing about Limitless is that it's a very hungry technique. You need either an insane amount of curse energy or a technique that lowers the cost of curse energy to practically zero. In comes my 6 eyes. So you're saying I won't have to burn my brain each time I use blue to its max output? Izuku asks. Essentially. But I'm not just gonna hand it over for free. You already have my Limitless technique. No, if you want to get stronger, you have to earn it. Gojo says with a devilish smirk. So keep leveling up, get more skills and techniques, and as you do that you'll get more and more access to my 6 eyes. Then when you beat the final boss, yours truly, you will become the strongest in the world. Izuku gulps, knowing just how strong Satoru Gojo is when he plays around in their training exercises. But fighting him at full power with all his might? That sounded impossible. But if it was needed to become the strongest, then I hope you're ready, Gojo-sensei. Izuku says, trying to sound courageous and determined, because one day it'll be your face on the floor instead of mine. Gojo laughs and slaps him on the back. That's the spirit. Now, it's time for you to get back out there. Hope you like being kissed by old ladies. Wait, Wadash. Izuku asks, but Gojo jabs both his index fingers on his chest like they were defibrillators. Clear. Ah. Izuku jolts up from a hospital bed in shock, startling recovery girl who was administering her quirk on his cheek. My, you almost gave me a heart attack there, young man. She says as she calms the shocked boy. Breathe, everything's fine. You're in my office in UA. We picked you up after you nearly blew up your head back in the entrance exam. Huh? Ah, right? Izuku pants feeling dizzy at the mention of that. That happened. Then he remembers something and turns to her quick. Is she all right? That girl, Kyoka Jairu. I saw her leg get crushed. You should be worrying about yourself more, young man. Recovery girl scolds. When I saw you standing there bleeding from every hole in your head, I was sure there was brain damage. I was ready to send you off to the hospital after patching you as best I can with my quirk, but now that appears unnecessary. Izuku shudders at the image. That bad? Huh? Yes. Very bad. Recovery girl nods before sighing. Anyways, the girl's standing outside, waiting for you. You gave everyone quite a fright, you know? Here, take these on your way out. She hands him a handful of gummies to Gojo's joy. Ah yeah, man, Shoko could learn some bedside manners from this one. She never gave anyone candy. She only ever had booze and cheap cigarettes under her desk. Gojo complains as Izuku eats them quickly to replenish his energy before heading out, bowing and thanking Recovery Girl as he does so. He opens the door and finds Jairu standing there, tapping her foot before glancing at the source of the noise and widening her eyes at the sight of him. Holy shit, she mutters. You're all right? Yeah. Izuku says, giving a small wave. I'm glad to see you're all right, Jairu.
I'm all right.
What about you? She asks angrily, giving a slight shove. I freaking saw you bleeding from your eyes, man. What the hell was that? Are you brain damaged or something? Izuku falters. Well, I saw you in danger and I had to help.
Danger?
It was an exam, they weren't going to kill me or anything. Can you imagine the lawsuits? Jairu shouts as she jabs a finger. Can you imagine what it would be like watching someone blow their brains out in front of me to save me from no danger at all? Izuku winces. Why yeah, but your leg was broken. I panicked and thought you were going to be crushed. Jairu sighs. Next time just kick the rock off or something. If you can twist a giant robot's head off, you can handle a couple rocks. You can do that without blowing your brains up, right? Izuku nods. I guess I should have thought about that. Sorry for worrying you, Jairu. You better be. I don't need someone's death weighing on my conscience, she mutters as she lightly punches his chest, and I certainly don't need a front row seat of someone's head pulling a scanners. Scanners? Izuku asks as both Gojo guffaw at him. Come on, scanners. That film from the 80s, with that guy's head blowing up. Gojo says incredulously, new plan. We're gonna rent out all the 80s films we can get our hands on. You don't know what you're missing out. I'm talking Terminator 1 and 2. Screw the sequels, they don't exist. Star Wars, Speed, Die Hard, Golden Gun, Never Say Die, Indiana Jones, Wrath of Khan, Blade Runner, Friday the 13th. As Gojo goes on about ancient films that were older than his grandparents, Jairu blushes. Why yeah, it's an old movie. My dad's a fan of the classics. We'd go on a few movie marathons every now and then. She explains, he has a whole shelf of old CDs with him. Oh, that's perfect. Izuku says before getting a confused look, and it was his turn to look embarrassed. I mean, I was recommended by a friend to check out those old films, like something called Blade Runner. You've never seen Blade Runner? Her jaw drops before huffing. Well, that settles it. Got your notebook with you? Huh? Of course. Izuku says as he whips it out of nowhere and hands it to her with a pen. Jairu takes it and flips to a page at the back, scribbling something and handing it back. My address and number. She explains to a confused Izuku. You nearly blew your brain up because of me, so technically I owe you one. You're free to drop by and borrow a couple if you want, just make sure to give me a call ahead of time. Izuku stares at the page in shock and freezes up while Gojo wolf whistles from inside his head. Her address and number at the same time? Damn, Midoriya, you got game. He laughs his head off as Izuku's mind struggles to process this as Jairu walks off. My bus is almost here, so I gotta run. She waves goodbye. Be seeing you, Green. Quite a selection we have here today, Nedzu says as they overlook the results of today's practical exam. A lot of them performed well, but there are certainly those that stand above the rest. This boy, for example, 70 villain points and 0 rescue points. He was luring them out with his explosives and eliminating them. Combined with the fact none of the other students dared to get close to him because of his explosions, it meant he could freely grind as many villain points as he wished. Snipes notes. And there's this other kid as well, Izuku Midoriya. 47 villain points and 40 rescue points. Midnight observes with a smirk, excellent combat sense. He's definitely well-trained in martial arts. Most with enhanced physical abilities tend to overwhelm with pure brute force, so he knows how to use what he's got. But apparently it's not a physical enhancement quirk, but spatial manipulation. Nedza notes as he plays back the footage of him ripping off the head of a zero-pointer with an orb of blue energy. It appears similar to your quirk, 13? It does. That explains why he was hesitant to use it. 13 nods. If it's that strong, he risks harming his fellow examinees by catching them in the area of effect. Strong, skilled, and willing to do what it takes to win. Ken says as he watches the playback of Izuku Midoriya occasionally leaping into fights to steal points from other examinees, but also willing to risk himself to save others when push comes to shove. That's pro material if I ever saw one. Looks like you got your work cut out for you, Aizawa. The black-clad teacher grunts as he flips through the files on the top-scoring students. It's not just skill and power that's needed to be a pro. Aizawa says, I'll have to wait and see if they really do have potential. You're gonna do that rational deception thing, aren't you? Yamada asks, looking tired as Aizawa remains suspiciously silent. Speaking of which, what's the list of recommended students like? He asks, changing the subject as Nedza nods. Ah yes, these are equally as impressive, although we have one that did withdraw for some reason. Nedzu says as he brings up a list of recommended students and their results, handing them around. Tashinori takes this and reads through them, surprised to see Endeavor's son there. If he was anything like his father, then it was likely this kid was going to go far. He skimmed through the rest of the recommended student list, wondering if one of them would be suitable to inherit his quirk when he almost gets a heart attack at the last profile, coughing out blood. Wawa ao what? Glad your exam's finally over. Now we can kick things up a notch? Gojo says as he casually steps away to dodge Izuku's flurry of kicks and strikes. Just because you got into UA doesn't mean I'm going to go easy. Haha, yes, sensei. Izuku says as he continues exhausting himself trying to land a hit on Gojo, who continues effortlessly avoiding his strikes. In his training with Gojo, they were eventually able to find styles of martial arts that would fit Izuku's style of fighting. While it was initially based on All Might's boxing-based punches, he eventually began favoring a style of mixed martial arts based on a combination of Muay Thai, Jeet Kune Do, and various styles of karate such as Shorin Ryu. While his waking days were full of physical body training, in his sleep he was in their shared mindscape, combat training, meaning every day he woke up sore and exhausted to his mother's confusion, but it meant he was able to squeeze in plenty of training, especially since time moves slower in one's head. First things to get rid of that bad habit, Gojo says, suddenly stopping to block a cursed energy-infused strike to his guts with his limitless. See that just now? Huh. Izuku asks confusedly before being pushed to the ground by Gojo with a blast of blue pulling him down. Ow! Tell me, how exactly are you using cursed energy in your attacks? Gojo asks. By channeling and directing them into my fist? Izuku says, sounding unsure as Gojo nods. Right, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's how everyone initially does it. Well, everyone except me, of course. He chuckles to himself before continuing. But despite how quick that is, you can feel a bit of lag before the energy reaches your limbs, right? Izuku widens his eyes as he experiments doing so, finding Gojo was right. A small, barely noticeable lag just before his fist was engulfed in cursed energy. So you're saying I need to make it go faster? Izuku mutters to himself. How? Think. Where do you feel your cursed energy comes from? Izuku pats his guts. Well, I feel it from my stomach, building up before I send it coursing to my arms and legs. And why must it go from your stomach to your limbs? Gojo presses as Izuku racks his mind. It's where I feel my negativity building up. So isn't that where? Izuku trails off in realization. Unless it's only lagging because I think that. Because I think my stomach and arms are different sections for curse energy to travel through when in reality it's all one big section. My entire body. Bingo! Gojo raises a thumb as Izuku begins focusing, breathing in a pattern as Gojo senses his cursed energy flow distributing itself evenly across his entire body instead of just focusing on building up in his limbs. There you go. Now you're one step closer to getting towards a black flash. Black flash, you mentioned that before. Izuku realizes. What is it? Some application of limitless. Far from it. Gojo shakes his finger. When your physical strikes make an impact, and cursed energy is applied 1/1,000,000th of a second after the impact, you distort space itself, causing your cursed energy to flash black and increase the power of that hit by the power of 2.5. It's luck-based, unfortunately. No sorcerer can bring out black flash willingly, not even me. The closest was one of my students, Yugi Itadori. That kid had a talent for black flash, got the world record of 4 in a row the day he learned it. Izuku looks at his hands in awe. So it's just like a video game critical hit. That's an apt description. Gojo laughs at the analogy before wagging his finger at Izuku. Now, you want to see if you can match that record? You said if I land a black flash, I can get 30 seconds of your 6 eyes? Izuku grins as he gets into a stance. I hope you keep your promise, Gojo-sensei, because I dash. But before he could start, he faintly hears something in the real world. Wait, I think that's my mom calling me. He looks to his side distracted. Must be time for dash. Sneak attack. Gojo shouts before slamming him with a limitless boosted palm strike.